Hello, how you doing?
Good.
All right, we in here now, y'all.
Okay, I see we live.
We are live now.
We live. We ain't got the music.
So I hope everybody can hear us. Hopefully we get some people hopping on in a minute. I want to really start into somebody's house on.
Joe, you playing music today? Put that in the chat. Joe back on the lag today.
All right. Well, the front porch discussions, y'all. I'm gonna start out by giving us a couple of little news comments, like I used to do. First and foremost, I apologize about last week us not having the front porch discussion, and the reason was a couple of our guests had some other engagements, and I also had something that came up. It was kind of unfortunate. In my household, we have been dealing with the COVID situation. So I was not in a position to really be handling this. We're just starting to get to the end of that now. My daughter tested positive on yesterday, so I will be stuck in the house a little bit longer, really trying to work on this and making sure everybody's good. No worries. Nobody has any harsh symptoms, anything like that. So we're good with that. As far as our pay it forward situation with front porch discussions, we haven't done that in a number of weeks. We had Thanksgiving come up, and then we didn't have last week. And the week before would have been the week that we were going to do it. But the business that I chose kind of refused the situation. I'll just say it like that. I guess they thought I was scamming or something, because they kept saying, well, what's in it for you? What's in it for you? And people find it hard to believe when you're coming just from your heart and just want to help and you don't want anything in return, because Front Porch Discussions doesn't ask for anything. We get one business to give 10% of their revenue. We take that, whether it's in check, cash, whatever. We make sure we get a cashier's check so it's all above board, and we give that money, that 10%, to the next business and ask them to do the same. So I'm in the process of trying to find another business, hopefully by next week. But I couldn't even go out this week had I found one, because I have to quarantine. So that's where we are as far as the pay it forward situation. If any of you out there in the front porch world know some great Black businesses that would love to participate, please shoot me a message. If you have my personal information, you can text me. If not, just put it in the DMs on my Facebook page. So with that being said, tonight we're going to deal with mental health and the Black community. We have some distinguished guests with us tonight. We have Dr. Rae Lundey, we have Mr. Terrence Covington, and we have Miss Angela Teal. I'll let each one of them go into their own spiel and introduce themselves, starting with Dr. Lundey, then going to Mr. Covington, and then to Miss Teal.
What's up, everybody? Hey. So I am Dr. Rae Lundey, affectionately referred to as often as the self-care doc. I am currently in my day job. I serve as the Associate Vice President for Student Health, Counseling, and Wellness at Wiley College. We are the home of the great debaters. And I essentially am someone who is passionate about being an advocate for mental health and about encouraging people to take better care of themselves, particularly folks that look like us, Black folks. Quite often, we are not taking care of ourselves in the ways in which we can remain whole and healthy. And so my life's mission is to make sure that we have these kinds of conversations. So I'm excited about the dialogue that we will have today, and I appreciate the invitation. So thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Terrence Covington. I'm assistant principal currently at Neal Middle School, but I do have a counseling background in both mental health and school counseling. My passion has always been about kids. I think when it comes to mental health, we sometimes take for granted that our kids do struggle with various things when they get to various ages and stages in life. So it's been my mission to serve kids and their families as best as I can. I'm born and raised in Durham. I'm a Hillside High School graduate. Go Hornets. And I love giving back to my community any way that I can. Being in a school setting allows me to do that and reach a lot of our students and our families. And during this time, it's been vital because they're dealing with a lot with this virtual learning, and it's taking its toll mentally as well as physically on some people. So I think this discussion will kind of give people an opportunity to hear some feedback and get some coping skills. So I hope that we have a great discussion this evening.
To undergrad and graduate school, in a school count. This is 28th year. So I'm also a licensed
Breaking up.
my own. Breaking up.
Yeah,
No,
you're
breaking up bad.
Mhm. I heard you was doing something for 28 years though.
28 years.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Look at Joe. Joe, we're doing introductions.
Me now.
Mm,
You're going in and out, in and out.
Yeah, I got
I don't even know why.
man, we're having extreme technical difficulties tonight, and if this continues, I'm gonna go so far as to invite guests back next week so we can do it again. But we are having technical difficulties tonight for some unknown reason. I have
It
no
looks like
clue
it got
what's
better.
going
It
on.
got better. Wait, we can see and hear you now, Angela. This is the first time I've been able to see and hear you.
Yeah,
So talk.
I have no clue what.
Okay, so you can. Okay, I don't know what. I have never had any problems at all, ever. But
Yes, we can hear you and
okay.
see you. Good deal.
Okay, so I'm Angela Teal. I am a graduate of North Carolina Central University, Eagle Pride, and I have my graduate degree, my master's in school counseling. I also am a licensed clinical mental health counselor as well. But my full-time job right now is a school counselor at Shepherd Ivy Magnet Middle School for 28 years. This is my 28th year. Looking to retire soon and completely focus on my practice. But my passion also is self-care and exposing or making people aware of mental health challenges, especially in our community, because we still are struggling with the stigma, and I want to make sure that we educate people and knowing and being able to take care of themselves. Our minds are the most important thing in our bodies that we need to take care of. So I'm looking forward. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to having this discussion as well. Who just left?
Joey just left.
we're gonna try to keep it going in his absence. So we've been doing this turnaround mental health. I'm aware of what mental health looks like, but
Breaking up.
for me, I'm breaking up too.
It's a bad, like, humming sound.
Yeah, I think if we could mute ourselves if we're not talking, I think it's the others of us that need to mute. Yeah.
Okay, am I still breaking up? I'm good. Okay. So can we start with like what a definition of mental health? Because I know like physical health, I'm aware of what that kind of looks like and can strive to that. You know, my muscles are responding the way I want to, my breathing is I have the dexterity to do things, but when it comes to like mental health, like how would you define mental health? I think Dr. Lundey even brought in the wholeness of what mental health is. So how do we define what mental health is?
I would start by just saying that mental health is our capacity for well-being. It is your level of functioning as it relates to your emotional status. And so when you think about, I usually like to draw the parallel when we think about our physical health, right? When we say someone is physically well or physically healthy, we think that they can run. We think maybe that their diet is balanced. We might think that their organs, all things are aligned. And so if you wanted to draw that parallel with mental health, you think about your ability to respond to stress, and your ability to do so in a way that is measured, or in a way that allows you to remain emotionally regulated. And so when we think about emotional regulation, if someone were to be extremely well, I give you an example. If you think about a small child who is having maybe a temper tantrum or been triggered for about something, we would expect the child to have that response. When we think about our emotional health, if we are triggered by things and our response to that is incongruent to what we think it would be, you know, somebody drops something on your toe and you fall out and you have an emotional breakdown over that, one might say that your emotional well-being is off balance. And so your emotional health and your mental health is our capacity to regulate emotionally and to respond in congruent or appropriate ways. And appropriate doesn't necessarily mean normal. I usually like to stray away from that word, because what is normal? It's relative. So you really want to think about it relatively. So, you know, if you tend to be someone who is emotionally expressive, as I am, a normal response for me, an emotionally healthy response for me might be to cry at something, but that's okay because that's my kind of personal experience. But it would be incongruent actually for me to not cry about something that is really intense. I guess I'd go on to say, and then I'll hush up some other colleagues can talk, but it is appropriate for us in this time of COVID-19 for our mental health and our emotional well-being to be challenged. It is a challenging time. So if you are experiencing things like moments of sadness, if you're experiencing things like anxiety, that is actually an emotionally appropriate response to a crisis. And so our emotional health, we can look at what's going on, how am I responding, and how am I regulated? So those are a few things I would say to get us started.
Okay, I had a question. Why do you think in the Black community mental health is such something that we don't really talk about? We kind of shy away from it, and because a lot of us have had major trauma through our childhoods and now we're adults, we don't have the skill set to cope with it. So why do you think the Black community kind of shies away from it?
I have lots I could say, but I'll leave it. Let's share. We're gonna share the porch.
Yeah, share it around.
The front porch.
I'll jump in and start. I think a lot of it comes from the people who provide the service. A lot of them don't look like us, so we're not as trusting because some of that trauma comes from, you know, slavery and things like that. And I think that plays a part in how we trust our Caucasian counterparts, and that plays a part in how we divulge our information. And then I think a part of it for, especially for African Americans, is the spiritual aspect of it. We sometimes think we can pray everything away, and not saying that spirituality is not important. It is, but I love God like everybody else, but he gives us the common sense and the wisdom to seek help and guidance from those who are trained to help us maneuver through life, because nobody goes through life without assistance from someone and guidance from someone. So I think those are some factors that I have come across in my time in mental health. People just sometimes try to brush things under the rug, or they try to go to the church for the answer. And not saying those things are, especially church, is not an answer, but I just think you need some guidance from a trained professional to help you cope and how you can go through this journey, because like I said, no one can get through this thing alone. And I think the more that we seek help and guidance, we'll start to open up. And I think we need more people who look like us in those positions to help. And I think Black people will tend to go for the service.
I totally 100% agree with that. The mistrust of the mental health providers. Also, we've been taught what goes on in our home stays in our home, and we somehow cannot get over that stigma, especially with our Black males. And that is something that we're constantly trying to do better in, and by just having these conversations. So again, I thank you for having this platform for us to talk, and hopefully people will hear and know that the importance of reaching out and getting help, because we cannot do this alone. with everything that's going on right now, even now with the pandemic, all this life stresses, you know, we tend to think, oh, we're so strong, I can do it. And then sometimes people feel like it's a sign of weakness to reach out. So we've got to teach people, but being strong is, and being smart is reaching out to someone to get help. Just, you know, the opposite of what you're thinking.
Well, let me ask this question first, because some people don't know. Does insurance cover your therapy, and what impact does therapy have on, and what positive impacts will it have in the long term?
It's a higher copay.
Okay, well, some people don't know, so that's why I asked.
So yes, your health insurance provider is required to support and or offer coverage for mental health. Also, your employer, many employers have what's called an employee assistance program. And what that looks like is it's the employer's effort to try to provide you with some support. And you should be able to receive, it's usually like 5 to 7 sessions with a therapist without having to pay. One of the things that makes mental health care a challenge, in addition to what Terrence said, as well as Angela, is that access to care. So in some instances, we've not sought mental health support or not even talked about it because it wasn't offered to us. We didn't have, it was beyond the scope of what we could afford. And so the fact that many employers now have employee assistance programs is really something we want to take advantage of, because again, that is to no additional cost. It should be covered in whatever benefits you have. But your health insurance provider should cover, even if you go beyond those 5 to 7 sessions with the employee assistance program, you should be able to receive coverage for your mental health care. But I would go on to say, in another conversation I've had recently, people talk about, well, I could just be vulnerable and say, so I'm a clinical psychologist and I see a therapist, but I do not use my health insurance. I pay out of pocket. I pay out of pocket because oftentimes I actually have a fear, and this is, I think, it lends itself to why people are concerned about mental health. It's the stigma and the judgment. And so what's called pre-existing conditions, if you claim certain things on your health insurance, if you were to lose it and try to get it again, mental health is one of those things that they could deny you for insurance coverage. And so there is both a political, a socio-cultural, there are all sorts of layers to that initial question you asked about why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we seeking support? And oftentimes it's because systemically it has not been in our benefit to do so. We could lose health insurance. We could, it was costly in a way. And so I think now we can receive that coverage, but it's really important to know kind of some of the history of things. It's not just, it is that we want to do what stays in this house, what's said in this house stays in this house, but essentially the system was not set up for us to seek the support we needed. And so this conversation and ones like it are our ways of kind of fighting back and saying, no, this is what we deserve. And so I'm so glad, I just echo what's already been said, that we need to be having this so that the system can change.
Yeah, there's many disparities. I'm sorry, because even our medical doctors, they would not even recommend us as African Americans for mental health care, but they would recommend that white people to have mental health care. So that is real.
So a couple of things that y'all have been mentioned on here, like one was a temper tantrum, and the other one had to do with, kind of like your parents saying, it's stay in his house, kind of like put your best foot forward. Don't let them see you crack. So could that type of, I guess, rearing, could that be considered like trauma, like childhood trauma, coming up under circumstances where, you had this tantrum and it's like, boy, stop that and get up, act right. Or if you feeling some kind of way and it's like, no, I don't need you to feel that way. I need you to feel this way. Like as a young man, it wasn't about like, the tears and things, like you would dry that up. So could that be considered childhood trauma?
Speaking from a male perspective, I think it can be. Because I think as young men, we're taught if we fall, like you just said, suck it up, don't cry. And I think that starts to teach us to suppress our feelings and feel as though we can't be vulnerable and show our emotion. And then once that occurs so many times, you become shut off. Then when you do finally show some emotion, it comes across as anger or isolation or resentment towards somebody. And then that lends itself to affecting you and how you deal with people, how you conduct yourself in relationships, whether that be your friendships or in your spousal relationships or your boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever your sexual orientation is. And I think that plays a huge part. And I think especially for men, especially Black men, we don't have platforms that make us feel comfortable to be vulnerable in a space where we feel as though we can let our guard down, because we're always on. We have to be tough. We have to be macho, and that's how we're reared. And it does have an impact on how we deal with people in our relationships and how we mentally handle things and how we deal with stress.
And the unfortunate thing too is because men were, or little boys were taught to keep man up, but unfortunately you keep manning up and eventually you're going to be man down, because it also affects health. High blood pressure, diabetes, heart problems, and all of that. Because when you have to carry on that stress and not deal with it, not get help for it, you're carrying all of that. And that's so unhealthy. And that's when it causes a lot of other health issues. Not just for Black men, not just for men, but for women too. But men seem to always feel like they have to, they feel like they have to be the provider for their house. They want to be able to take care of the household, and if anything, if they can't do that, they feel like it's a weakness. So and if they keep holding on to that stress, which we're doing, and which we're trying to let them know that you need to go talk to someone, you need to be able to release some of that. And even when the guys get together, many times you're not talking about, and I'm just saying this from what my husband tells me. My husband may be different, but tell me, you all don't always talk about, oh, I'm having some marital difficulties, or I'm having financials. You're talking about cars, you're talking about women, you're talking about sports, what have you, but everything except what you're really dealing with. And it's all a facade. Am I right? Or,
You have, right? You have, right? You have.
I actually read something the other day about that, Angela, where the article mentioned how for men, they've been socialized and it's culturally appropriate to talk about, sports and to kind of keep it surface. But that since the pandemic has been here, that many men are realizing that their relationships do lack some of the depth that you're talking about, and that has caused a shift, and perhaps even the impetus for conversations like this, because I know Joe was the one, or I know that there's a strong male presence or voice here in these conversations. So there is a rise in awareness, is what the article mentioned, that men are seeing that, okay, maybe it would be important to talk about some things just that were connected to their emotional health, and realizing that doing so doesn't take away from their masculinity. I think a lot of this has been this fear of the attack on the Black male identity. Maybe, there are times when if we kind of infuse in this conversation the LGBTQ community or gender expression and all of those things, a lot of times emotion, if we're keeping it real, emotions and emotional expression was given to women. That's a female thing. Right. And the reality is it's a human thing. We all have emotional health. So that definition I gave at the beginning, that didn't just apply to women in terms of your ability to regulate. Men and women, we all have some level of emotional well-being. And so again, men are starting to realize that it's okay for me to talk about this and still hold on to what I see myself, or who I see myself to be as a man. I did want to just add one point though about trauma though, Eric, you were talking about, could it be traumatic? And the reality is, yes, as a people, we have generations of trauma. Epigenetics says that we are carrying with us the trauma of our ancestors. And when we think about some of the responses that Angela was talking about, actually male responses to emotional expression, a lot of those were coping strategies. So when you have a traumatic experience, you develop a coping strategy that keeps you alive. It's what you think will keep you safe. So men had to be angry and expressive. If you think about slavery, if they showed too much emotion or if they got sad, that could cause them to lose their life, right? If you think about like our history wise, why that was a thing that we needed to do. The trouble becomes when you maintain a trauma response or coping mechanism that no longer works for you. So holding your emotions in, being angry now is something that can be detrimental to your relationships. But because we haven't learned those skills, we kind of continue to pass it down generationally. And so what this conversation and this time is about is interrupting and breaking that narrative that we've learned and passed down generationally. But I always like to say that it was originally a survival mechanism. And so sometimes we shame ourselves and we're like, well, men just need to stop holding it on all in. Well, no, that developed for a reason. Or when we think, well, folks just need to, and I'm guilty of this in my field. And, we want everybody to feel and talk about it. But the reality is that wasn't always safe for people to do. And so we want to give people the space, the history, and the knowledge to say, okay, this developed from some place. We didn't just pull it out of our tails that we didn't want to talk about things. There's a reason we don't want to talk about things. And I'm sure we'll get to this later. There's a reason we don't feel safe and comfortable with things like the vaccine coming out for COVID-19, right? We've got fear around that because there are these times in history when it wasn't safe, our health and our emotional, whether it's emotional or physical, people were trying to take us out of here. And so a lot of this is fear-based. I think that's the thing, a word we haven't used. A lot of our responses are fear-based. And so really this is a conversation about how do we address our fear in safe spaces.
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? I know you said something about fear-based. So how do we kind of cope with that to deal with the COVID-19 and the pandemic? Because it just seems like the news just drives it down our throat of what's going on, and you get these subliminal messages, and then all of a sudden you build up this fear, and either you have people that like, it's not real. Then you have people like, oh my God, we got to get the vaccine. So how do you really like cope with that? Because this time is just a difficult time. I just feel like the news and social media is just like on us, and it's just like, it's tearing us apart. That's how I feel. I think it's just tearing us apart.
I'm trying to share the porch.
Okay.
It's almost like your physical health. You have to be mindful of what you put into your body. And so you have to be mindful of what you put into your mind and what you allow to take control over your mind. You have to be confident in what you believe in, and you have to do your own research. You can't depend on somebody else to tell you what you should think and what you should feel. You have to go look out and research and find things on your own, and then you can kind of cope with it and deal with it in that way. And if you need help, you can reach out to people who you trust and you've built relationships with to help you process what it is that you're feeling. But just like physical health, like I said, you have to be mindful. You go to the doctor, they tell you don't eat this, so you won't gain weight or so you can be healthy. You have to do the same thing mentally. You have to be mindful of what you allow to get into your mind and what you listen to and what you see.
And also limit your watching the TV, looking at social media, because all of that, it can be overload. And that's what makes us fearful, because we're hearing all of these things and they're contradictory, right? We don't know what's real, we don't know what's true, we don't know what's false. And so just like Terrence said, it's definitely important to do your own research, but also limit the amount of time that you are watching the news. Turn it off and do something else, because that will increase your fear if you continue to do that.
Well, since we was talking about COVID, I am a very social person. I like social interactions with people, connecting with people. Could this social distancing, or I know for myself personally, like it's affecting me, but overall, the social distancing, us limiting our interactions with people, like I just had Thanksgiving and I couldn't really go interact with my family as I normally would due to everyone's fear that they might get COVID. So does that social distancing, does it also affect our mental health? Could that have an adverse effect on our mental health?
Absolutely. When we think about mental health, one thing I can introduce is this idea of the 8, and there's a 9th, but areas of wellness. And so one area of wellness or well-being is your social relational well-being. And COVID has put a strain on how we engage socially. And when you're not connected, we are all wired for human connection. A baby that does not receive affection and touch, studies show that baby's life expectancy decreases and the baby could die. Right. So we are wired for that. What we've had to do in COVID is to recognize different ways of getting that connection that we need. And so the answer to your question is yes. The challenge has been for us to not think that we can't get the social interaction, but to redefine what social interaction is going to look like for us. And I think we're doing that now, right? We're here sitting on the porch together, and I'm all the way in Texas, and y'all are in Durham. So we're able to connect and increase. Just so so I'll give you also one last thing, and then I'll hand it over to Angela. When you think about your senses and your ability to communicate, when one sense diminishes, your other senses kind of take over and they strengthen, right? So if we think about physical, the ability to physically touch, that's been taken away. So then our verbal, auditory, like our sight, we have to increase our connection in using our other means or ways of communication, because physical contact is not the only way in which we communicate with each other. And so I think doing that has helped us, or as much as it could. It's one thing to note, though, that unfortunately, because of social distancing, a thing that has increased has been instances of domestic violence, sexual assault. And so while some people have been limiting their contact, or we haven't had contact, there's a group of people for whom there's been more unfortunate negative physical contact. So I do want to put that out there as someone who is passionate about helping folks who are going through trauma in that way.
Absolutely. Also, the lack of connection can make people, there's more stress and anxiety. There's been more people, more stress, more anxiety, isolation, loneliness, which, manifests the stress and anxiety. But also, I know for myself, in the beginning, and even now, sometimes I'm finding myself having difficulty sleeping, like I'm waking up at night.
Me too.
And yeah, I mean, it's a real thing. And a lot of people, like I know in the summer, people are, I just can't sleep. Well, that's a thing. Difficulty sleeping, focusing, concentrating, all of those things. This has had an impact on people in different ways, and everybody's experiencing different things. But those are some of the factors. Those are some of the things that people are experiencing. So it is really critical to continue to find other ways to make those connections, as was said, and be creative. Also sometimes just taking a walk. I know we're supposed to be away from each other, but I've been just going out, taking a walk, just getting some fresh air, getting out of the house. I don't know about you all, but I've been noticing too, more people I've been talking to, they've been in the house so much, they notice all the bad things, all the things that are wrong with the house, and they're spending more money trying to fix the house and painting and getting new furniture or whatever. So, but also the increase of alcohol abuse, addiction, people who are struggling with sobriety, that has been challenging for them during this time as well. So, Eric, you asked if it's impacting. Absolutely it is. So this is when we really need to check on each other a little bit more and make sure we're doing okay.
What advice would you, I teach kindergarten, so I'm a kindergarten teacher and I've been teaching for like 23 years. What advice would you give parents to help their children cope with this, with the social distancing and the norms and the anxiety of not understanding why they can't have play dates and stuff like that? So what advice? Because I'm old, I'm stressed.
Yeah, I've been working, like I even have some kids in my neighborhood, and they have been making, being intentional. Their parents have been intentional about, biking, being outside. As I'm inside online doing Zoom meetings, I'm looking at the kids. They're making sure they're running around or doing some things. They've even had and unfortunately not everyone can afford this, but they've had someone doing Taekwondo come to the house, and they're doing the lessons outside. But making sure that they do stay on some type of schedule and they don't get caught on watching TV or on the games all the time. They really need to make sure that they have some outlets other than that. Just be and communicating, making sure you're asking them how they're feeling, what they're feeling, and address it. Don't try to sweep it under the rug.
I love what you said about well, what came up for me as you were talking is that we need to create structure for them. Sometimes they may be resistant to that, but what helps us reduce anxiety is when, you think about creating lists, making a plan. We are in a traumatic experience, like I said, and the first responsibility or goal to reduce a trauma response is to create safety. And again, you create safety, or a child feels safe when they know what to expect. So even though we know that the outside world, we really don't know what to expect right now, you can control, when you can differentiate between what's in your control and out of your control, you can control your household, or at least that's what you want to kind of regain a sense of control. So we talked about get them on a routine, and that routine should include play. Like was said, have them run around, get some of that energy out. Just because they're at the house doesn't mean that they still don't need, it doesn't mean they should play all day, right? But it means that there are times when they can expel that energy. And I think, like was said earlier about limits for us around social media, we also limit for them the amount of video games they may be playing, the amount of sugary foods we're giving them, the amount of, so parents, it may feel like, again, there's so much outside of your control, but we want to empower parents. I would want to empower parents to say, like, the things that you do for yourself to create order, you want to kind of model that for your children. To what I kind of initially go with always, which is parents have to take care of themselves so that they have the bandwidth to take care of their children. Self-care is always my first thing, because when I am stressed, anxious, tired, and sleepy, my temper is short. I can't, I'm responding in ways that don't help a situation. And so as much as parents can, I would also encourage them, in addition to creating that structure, setting limits, kind of giving, kind of partitioning out the time, is to also make sure that you are intentional about taking care of yourself, because again, that's going to help you to be the best for your children. And it helps also when you're calm, it'll help the anxiety that your children might have. It'll help that reduce as well.
And I would just add to just make sure that you recognize your child's feelings, talk to them calmly about how you're feeling, let them know that it's okay for them to feel that way, and just kind of process with them how they're feeling, especially with older kids, because, they're a lot more social than younger kids. They want to be with their friends, and just let them know that it's just not safe for us to do certain things right now. But, pick up the phone and call your friends, be more intentional about reaching out to your friends and your loved ones, just to let them know that you're okay and that you're checking on them. Because I know, like for my son, he loves going to see Papa and Grandma. And sometimes they can't happen when he wanted to happen as much as he would like to. And just explain to him that, things are going on that are out of control. But as soon as things get back to normal, we can do that. But, he FaceTimes with them as much as he can. So just utilizing technology to make sure that we stay connected with those that we love.
I hear you saying there that we want to normalize we want to normalize for them that it's okay to have feelings of sadness or anxiety. And that is, we want to do that for everybody, for the adults, for the children. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and a lot of times we're acting like everything is supposed to be okay. So I love that you said process with them, because sometimes we dismiss our children's feelings, thoughts, as a way of trying to protect them from something, when in fact engaging them in that dialogue is how we break this cycle of talking about our emotions and processing and working through it. So I love that.
So yeah, coming from a community where you really don't talk about feelings and express the spectrums of feelings that you can have, like how do you get to a point of, because if I ask somebody how they are, it's mostly like, I'm good, you know, everything's good. Or like if I'm asking children or young people, you know, either they'll say like, I mean, I don't know, or I'm okay. So how do you get to a level where you can really express your feelings? Like, I mean, it seems easier said than done in the Black community.
Give people permission to be vulnerable is one thing. Vulnerability is like a dirty word, right? We don't want to be vulnerable. But I also think sometimes we don't know what to say because we don't have the language for it. So one of the things that I have a friend, I will ask her how she's doing, and typically she'll say she's fine, and I'll ask, what does that mean? And I have sent her an emotional expression chart that breaks down the range of emotions. And so when she gives me mine, I'm like, you got to go to the chart. Tell me what that really means. And usually it's some subset of like, I'm confused. Right? Well, what? I missed all of that because, we use I'm happy, mad, sad, good, okay. Right? Like those are kind of and so I think vulnerability and challenging each other to go beyond just that surface perfunctory response, and then not shaming people when they do. If somebody takes the opportunity to be vulnerable with you, and then you dismiss their feelings or you shame them, then they're never going to feel comfortable to do that again. So those are some things I might suggest.
I think it depends on trust and who you have a connection with, because we won't be vulnerable with everyone. I think those that have built some trust with us over the years and over time, we're more likely to be vulnerable with them. And like the good doctor just said, being vulnerable, is not something that should be frowned upon. I think when someone comes to you in a vulnerable state, that means that they trust you and they feel like you have a connection and you have their best interest at heart. So they're trusting you with that information and their feelings so that you can help them process through what it is that they're going through.
Yeah, I think Eric, when you were saying like it's not going to be with anybody. You obviously have to have some type of relationship with that person for them to be able to open up to you. But if you sense, there's something different about them, and you've just sensed that something's off, open up and let them know, I'm feeling like something else is going on. Just let them know I'm here for you. You may not want to talk about it right now, this moment, but I'm going to check on you in a few hours, and then when you do that, then that shows, and if you really check back on them, that shows them that you are really concerned, and they may be more open to open up to you.
So in that sense, a lot of times I've been told I'm kind of pushy when it comes to trying to, I guess, crack this nut of people's feelings. So from a therapist point of view, could you press too hard on somebody as it relates to their feelings and how they're feeling?
Absolutely. They may not be ready right now, but even with children, what's going on? You live with them, so something's off, right? And what's going on? They may not want to talk right then, but you just let them know, look, I'm here for you. Okay, when you're ready to talk, I'm right here. I'm going to check on you again. Okay. Dana just wrote something. Sharing your emotions can help someone else open up and share how they may feel. Being transparent with your own feelings. Exactly. You say, well, you know what? I'm feeling some kind of right now, then that might help them to open up to then talk to you about their feelings. Yeah, you don't want to shut them down. I mean, you don't want to be too pushy because that can make them withdraw.
sometimes your presence is enough to help someone that's not ready get there. So a lot of times we feel like we want to ask someone what's going on, what's wrong, and we know that there's something there. They're not ready to talk about it, and we want to push. Instead of pushing, just continue to be present. I think that's what I heard you say too, is that if they know that, okay, I'm not ready to talk about it now, but when I am ready, she'll be there. That can make all of the difference.
I did a training just yesterday. We had a big push in the Washington, D.C. School system about SEL, social emotional learning. And one of the things they were talking about is asking open-ended questions. And once you ask the open-ended questions, then you relate to it. Like, oh, that happened to me when I was a child, whatever. And sometimes though that can help, because sometimes children can be very introverted and they don't want to discuss what's going on. And then sometimes with little children, you can physically see what might anxiety or what type of issues they may be having. So for younger kids, I think sometimes it's a little bit more easier to kind of figure out. You can kind of look at them and see, okay, something's going on at home, and to try to figure out what's happening, what's going on. Yeah.
Something else y'all mentioned too was about the coping skills and how we kind of go into survival mode. How do you know that, what habit you have might be just a coping survival skill and not really a wellness skill? How can you distinguish between those two?
I think there's certain things that we do when we're trying to avoid stuff. I think a lot of times the most obvious thing is we dive into our work when we're trying to avoid dealing with our own stuff. We try to overcompensate in other areas. We become overly helpful to others. But then when you go home, you have to deal with yourself. So you can't be untruthful with yourself. You know that you're feeling a certain type of way. You have to learn how to manage that. And I think that goes to your support system. Some people will be able to see that you're going through something. Some people will be able to hear in your voice. Some people will be able to tell by your actions. So I think coping skills, it may be, I just need to isolate for a little bit, read a book, go for a walk. I might have to take a drive and just be one with myself so I can kind of gather my thoughts. Because when you're not whole, especially for us in the helping profession, when we don't deal with our stuff, we're not beneficial to anybody. Because as the doctor said earlier, our stuff will start to come out. We'll be short-tempered, we'll get angry, and then they'll be like, well, what's wrong with this person? Because they always expect us to be on point all the time. So I think for us in the helping profession, it's very key for us to have coping skills and kind of share those coping skills and how we deal with it. I think being transparent with those that we deal with and let them know that we don't always have it together. We have our own struggles as well, and we have to learn some coping skills for ourselves.
Something that we have here in the comment section is about continuing to be present. And I think that if your coping skill, to your point, to Terrence's point about if it takes us away from the moment, or if it's an escape mechanism, then likely that's something that long-term won't be beneficial for you. It's important to note that sometimes you really do need to take a break. Right? Like sometimes you get emotionally flooded and emotionally overloaded. And we think about all of the COVID instances, or if we think about the trauma we see with the killing of Black and brown bodies, all of that, like it is okay to need to take a break and not be present in that moment, but it really needs to be a pause. I talk about sometimes the power of pause. We give ourselves pause, then we can kind of recharge ourselves so that we can come back and be more present. But a coping skill that takes us away for too long and we're seeking to escape, then those are usually the things that can be detrimental for us. So if you think about having a drink every now and then is cool, but if you're drinking so that you don't feel anything because you want to be numb, if you're doing things like with food and sex, those things as well, we need food. But if you're eating food every time you feel anxious, or if you're not like me, sometimes when I'm anxious, my stomach shuts down and I don't eat anything. And then I'll go and I'll be like, oh, I kind of didn't really eat much today. And so that back to this idea, thank you, Daniel, for that, being repeating that for us. I think Terrence said it, but being present. And if your coping skill takes you away from that being present and you're doing it too long, that's an indicator that is something you might want to shift.
I have a quick question. Why do you think when you go through something as men or women, usually just kind of women, and you go through a traumatic situation and you go to the doctor and you're having a stress and anxiety and your chest is hurting, they want to automatically put you on medication. And they say, hey, well, let me prescribe this for you and take this and let me see how you do with it. Why is that an alternative? Like, shouldn't it be something else? Just asking.
Well, doctors are trained. So I can say the reason why initially I wanted to be a psychiatrist or wanted to do MD, but I did PhD instead, because I said I wanted to. I had this when I finished my PhD. I got the shirt made that said, "I don't write prescriptions. I am the prescription." And essentially, it was an emphasis that I like to place on how oftentimes what's going on for us physiologically, there is an emotional connection to it as well. So the is going to that's what they're trained to do, is the short answer. They are trained to look at your physiological response, and our medical system is based on treatment, not prevention. And so when we think about how we want to be healed and whole, our conversation today has been about like a lifestyle change, about developing practices that will be preventative and sustaining. Our medical system is based often on Western practices are about treating a symptom, and sometimes the quickest way to treat a symptom is with medication. But it's not to say that you can't talk to your doctor and say like, hey, I really don't feel comfortable going that route. Do you have any information about alternative approaches? We have to start advocating for ourselves in that way. So even if that's the first response that they go to, that we find ourselves being able to say, you know what, I know that there's some alternative ways that we could approach this, and challenge them. We're paying them all this money. Right. Challenge them to give you some options. And I think I said this earlier too, do our own research to know kind of what maybe are some potential strategies to help outside of medication.
Oh, great. Well, I think we almost ran out of time. What do you think?
Yeah, we were right there. We're knocking on the door. Yeah. We're knocking on the door. But we got to get some some tips on self-care and wellness before we get out of here. It may be a part 2. Who knows?
Oh, we're gonna speak into existence. We're gonna do a part 2. We have to do a part 2 because we have a whole lot we still need to talk about.
Yes. So what are the take homes? Give us some stuff to build our self-care and our wholeness before we go.
I would just say be intentional about reaching out to your loved ones, staying connected to people. Find a hobby or something that you enjoy so that you can relax and kind of step back from what it is that's maybe bogging you down. And don't be afraid to tell people you just need a minute to yourself. Sometimes you have to say no just to protect your time and protect your energy. And I would just be mindful of what you allow to come into your mind, what you see, and put limits on the social media stuff and the news stuff, like Ms. Teal said, and try to make the most out of this situation, because I will say, just reflecting, this is giving me more time to spend with my son, my wife, and my family. So there are some benefits to it. We can't always look at it from the negative perspective.
And to piggyback on that, we have to try to practice thinking positive, okay? And if we continue to feed, have the media feed into our heads that negative things, you're going to feel bad. So we got to always try to find the positive out of the negative. Like, yeah, this is a pandemic, but there has to be some good, whether or not, you are getting closer with some family members. You are learning more about them, having more time for self-awareness and making sure that you take, I like what you said, Dr. Pause. We need a moment to pause. I love that. And it's nothing wrong with that. And we have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to take care of others. So we can't take care of anybody or care for anybody if we don't take care of ourselves first. And also just remember, your mind is the most important part of your body. Without your mind, we don't want to be without our mind, right? I thank God every day. Thank you for letting me be in my right mind today, right? So we need to protect that. So self-care, mental health, getting therapy is nothing wrong with that. We need to break that stigma. Get therapy. Everybody needs therapy. It would be a better world if we all had therapy. It should be required.
I love it. I love it. I'll leave you with the 3 P's and the 3 M's. So pause, play, and prepare. Pausing can look like resting, prayer, meditation, walks in nature, play. We hear all the time recently about Black boy joy, just this idea of joy. The reality is this trauma has, in some ways, when we're in this fight or flight response, we tend not to feel kind of the normal range of emotions. And joy is one way that we can combat the traumatic experience and can promote healing. So find moments of joy and play. Read a book, listen to your favorite song. And these things don't have to cost. A lot of times self-care gets this rap about, well, I don't have time and I don't have money. When you're getting dressed in the morning, you can put on your favorite song, and that could be a moment of joy. That could be something that infuses it, that sets the tone for your day. And then prepare. By prepare, what I mean there is what we talked about with the parents or for ourselves. Create some structure, get boundaries, prepare for your day, for your experience. The 3 M's would be mindset. So start your day each day with a mindset and an intention around how you want that day to look. And then you can also, these 3 M's, I would say, do at the beginning of the day. You also want to have some type of meditative practice. That can be prayer again, or it can be actual meditation and yoga. And then the 3rd M and the last thing I'll leave you with is move. We're in the house, but that doesn't mean we can't move. Movement, actually, there's a connection between your physiological and your emotional self. So if you move, you increase endorphins that create positive hormones that kind of increase your positive feelings. So we've got to start moving more. That will help our mood. That will also help our physical well-being. So mindset, meditation, movement, and pause, play, and prepare. Those are my 3 things: encouragement, self-care.
I love it. I love it. Well, Joey wasn't able to get on because he was having technical difficulties, but he assured me to let you all know that he is so thankful for you all coming on as guests this evening. We would definitely like to do a part 2 to front porch discussions. I think this was well needed. We needed it. Facebook world needed to hear it. Front porch discussion needed to hear it. So please, 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 I hope that you all will be willing to come back and do a part 2 to this. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. E, you got anything to say?
You did it well. Thank you all. And I'm going to go and center myself.
All right. Thank you again. And we're definitely having a part 2. You guys have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.